Welcome back everyone to the second part of our Gatecrash preview. This time we're going to be looking at Boros and the random white cards that are left lying around. First of all, we'll start off with Angelic Skirmisher. Nice rare to open. It's all three of the options as it triggers, as you see when it goes into combat. All three are great. There's no question. It's a great large flyer, good priced, good powerful card to just get in there, keep hitting. Can't say much more about it really. Next we've got Boros Elite. The battalion on this isn't as great as it first appears. You've got a 1-1 for 1, which, you know, in a draft situation, a 1-drop's always useful. Problem is, you need those 3 creatures to actually make it anywhere near useful, and it only works on an attack, not on block, as some of the battalions do, and it only affects this creature. So you need to make sure that when you attack with this, you're making that attack profitable. You need to make sure that your battalion is a good stack-up battalion. A full draft battalion deck, though, it's going to be a good card. You're going to want a couple in there, just for the sake of it. Now, Frontline Medic. There's been a lot of talk about Frontline Medic floating around the internet, but most of that is about outside of draft. It's about the secondary ability, sacrificing it to the counter. There's very few cards in set, heck, even in modern, that have got an X in them where it's really worth sacrificing it. So you can, especially in draft, you can pretty much ignore that secondary effect even exists. The battalion, on the other hand, is useful. The, indestructible, you can never argue with that. You really can't. And in a draft, if you can get one, grab it. It's going to make those attacks just that little bit more profitable, and it's going to make those attacks just better. And it's a 3 for 3, so it's never bad to have, just knocking around anyway. Gideon. Now, your Planeswalker. First one we've seen in the set so far. There's a lot of talk about him, but unfortunately, most of it's negative. He's had a lot of hate on the internet already, and we really have to agree. Problem is, he's really not that flexible. To really use his massive ability takes forever to get there. I mean, minus 15 is massive. You're pretty much never going to get to that state. Your +1, it depends very much on your opponent. Sometimes it'll work, sometimes it won't. It's very, very weird. And the 0, most of the time, is ignorable because he just becomes a creature. He's nukeable. Yeah, you can kill him off quickly, and he becomes a creature. Yes, in a draft, pick him. If you see him, pick him, because let's be honest, it's a 4/4 for 4 that pumps. So in a draft, why not? But getting him up to 15 to actually, do his full-on Wrath of God type effect is going to be quite difficult. So he's nowhere near as nice as you might originally think, but still, in a draft, why not? It's a 4/4 for 4 that pumps. Can't necessarily go wrong. Luminate Primordial. Now, this is not amazing in your draft situation. 7's really high on a curve, especially in a draft, but it's quite decent. The vigilance on it, for being a 4/7, means you can keep swinging, and you know that you've always got a really strong blocker there. Unfortunately, and that's about the best we can say. The secondary ability, it's not really going to be massive use in draft. It's going to be better in some of the more casual formats. Multiplayer formats, yeah, you're going to be looking to use him because it hits multiple people. In reality, it's a weird one, this one. So, up to you, but not the best draft card. Murder Investigation. Now, most of the time, creature enchants aren't brilliant, purely because you can easily lose them both 2 for 1. You pop it on a creature, next thing you know, they pop that creature, you've lost 2 cards, one go. This, on the other hand, completely turns that on its head, because you pop this on one of your creatures, your opponent doesn't necessarily want to kill that creature, because this effect will come in. It means that you've got that backup there of always knowing that that creature becomes that little bit more off the board for your opponent. There are some really nice large creatures knocking around, and 4, 5, 6 power. Throw this on it, you're instantly there, got a backup. That creature dies, you're laughing. It's a good card for a draft, even if you drop it on a 2/2 for 2 mana. You can't really go wrong. So it's a good card to draft. Don't go mad grabbing them all, but grab a couple. Assemble the Legion. It's a weird one. The first turn you get it out, it does nothing. Second turn, you get a token. But it then starts to ramp up. Once you get up to turn 3 or 4 of having this out, it becomes insane. And by turn 5 or 6 of having this out, if you ever get there, it's unstoppable. It's one of those really weird ones where the mana cost is high. You're not going to get it out until mid-game. If you can get it out early through any kind of trickery, wonderful, but it will ramp up really quickly, and if your opponent has no way of dealing with it, it can swing the game in your favour. Especially in a Boros deck with your battalion, you get more weenies to then swing in with the other creatures to make sure that you've always got those battalion triggers, make sure you're always getting the best out of the situation. Really nice card. If you see one in a draft, you might as well pick it up. I can see some really interesting decks being built around this in future. Certainly one I would keep an eye out for. This thing, Aurelia, is amazing. It's a really nice card. 2 attack phases a turn with haste just makes it disgustingly good. Even ignoring the fact that obviously we're talking about a flying vigilance creature. It's priced at 6 mana, it's priced to be good, but it really does make a massive difference, especially with the Boros deck when you're dealing with a massive wall of white weenies with all your battalions. If you can get 2 attacks in a single turn, you can easily swing the game in your favour. Obviously, if you see this in a draft, grab it. It's an amazing card. Even if you can't pick it up there, pick it up in a booster. Still definitely worth looking at rather than trading, because it's a really nice card to play with. Aurelia's Fury. It's insane. You see this in your draft, you pick this up. It is just crazy. It's a really nice card. It's mythic for a reason. It is a really nice card. Not only does it silence your opponent, which makes a massive difference. Do that at the beginning of their turn, nuke them down, they're essentially screwed that turn. You do so much damage, and it's brilliant. You can cast it in the middle of combat and completely wipe out their attack, and at the same point screw them for the rest of the turn. Really nice card. If you see it, grab it. Obviously it's mythic, you're not likely to see many of them, but it's certainly worth grabbing if you can find one. Now the new charms, all of the new charms seem to be pretty good. This one is beastly. You've got your double strike, which we all know double strike is insane. You've got a little bit of burn on it, which can be useful just for finishing off or swinging a battle just in your favour. And indestructible, let's be honest, when we're playing a heavy aggro deck, to be able to throw indestructible down in the middle of combat just completely swings everything in your favour. Really nice card, and obviously if you're playing a Boros deck, grab the charms without question. Firemane Avenger. It's got a brilliant battalion on it. Lightning Helix on a battalion, effectively. You're going to be attacking with multiple creatures anyway. You want to be every turn because of battalion. It's got evasion, so you're going to want to be getting in there every turn. And then the fact that you can then pick off either creatures or keep nuking the opponent and gaining life at the same time, there's nothing better. It's a brilliant card, and for 4 mana for a 3/3 flyer, it's reasonably priced anyway, let alone the battalion. So it's a really nice card. It's an easy first pick if you see one in a booster. Grab it, play it, use it. Foundry Champion. You get to play this in the pre-release anyway if you're playing as Boros. And unfortunately, it's probably one of the most underwhelming generals that they give you in the pre-release. It's a kind of a boring card. Yes, when you bring it into play, it does that nuke, and yes, if you're playing Boros, you're likely to have lots of creatures. But once it is quite expensive. Once it's done that, it's a 4/4 that can be pumped for mana. It's not amazing. Yes, obviously you get one, you're going to use it anyway if you're playing Boros, but it's not necessarily something that you would do much more with. It's something you're going to cast and then you're just going to swing with every turn. It's not a massively fun card, it's just something that is. It's okay, but it's not brilliant. Skyknight Legionnaire, we've seen it before. We saw it in the original Ravnica set. It's a cool reprint, nice art. It's a good card. 3 mana for a flying 2/2 with haste. It's never going to be a massively high peg because it doesn't have battalion, but it's always going to be something that's going to be good to have along in your battalion, and you want your flyers, so it's worth grabbing. Certainly worth grabbing. Sunhelm Guildmage. It's better than the original Selesnya Guildmage, and to be able to, as we said originally, with the artifact, it's amazing. Pump creatures, all your creatures for 3 on the attack when you're constantly attacking as Boros. That's brilliant. And the fact that you can pull in these 1/1 white, red-white creatures with haste. Yeah, they're a little expensive at 4 mana, but sometimes it's all it takes to be able to get your battalion off and then do that extra bit of damage. It's an amazing guild mage, and as always, if you're playing Boros, you grab them, no question. Boros Key Rune. It's one of the weaker key runes, and yeah, okay, it's useful for bringing out the battalion effects, sure. And let's be honest, the majority of cases it's going to be there for sorting out your mana balance and making sure that you've got the right balance to be able to cast what you need. It's not amazing, but it'll be useful late game to make sure that the battalion effect's going off and you're getting the extra beats in. So don't pass it up, but don't jump if you've got anything better. Boros Guildgate. It's Guildgate. It's got relatively boring art. You grab it, but what more can we say? Sacred Foundry. It's a shockland. It's a reprinted shockland, and it's got really nice art. Certainly one of our favourite arts, and you grab it, no question. Simple as that. Firefish Striker. It's a cheap battalion creature, 2/1 for 2, with a reasonable little battalion there. You can use it there to really lock down your opponent. If you've got a couple of these, use it to make sure that the most scary blockers are off the board for that turn and get your damage in. It's a good little creature either way. You're going to want lots of little weenies to get your battalions off, so grab it. Good card all round. Spark Trooper. It's Ball Lightning reprinted. They've added lifelink, but at the same point, it's still a 6/1. It's still only going to be in, hit, and then it's probably going to die very quickly. Yes, the lifelink makes it more profitable, but at the same point, you're running 4 mana to get some damage in and get some life. Is it worth it in the long run? Questionable. It's a nice card if you can pick it up in a draft, obviously. 6 life, getting back can always swing these draft games quite quickly, but at the same point, there are better cards out there. Whether it's worth trading this for something with a better battalion isn't a question, but in a draft, you're probably worth grabbing it. True Fire Paladin. It's your standard bear. 2/2 for 2 mana, except this time it's got Guild Mage level of pumping and it's got Vigilance. It's easy to use. You're going to be wanting these. You're going to be wanting 4 of them if you can. They're great cards, great cost, and the abilities are really good on them. So if you've got any spare mana, pump it. Again, it's another possibility for the bracers from the artifacts for real cheap pumping on that, but certainly worth grabbing. Now this has got a really scary battalion. I mean, it's a 1-1 for 1 with haste, which makes it a really nice weenie to get in the deck, get out early, hit, do lots of damage. But the battalion on that is just insane. Now, unfortunately, it is one of those cards that you're probably only going to get it to use once or twice before it dies because it's so small, but it can make your one battle where you swing for everything, it can just really ramp up the damage with that first strike and trample. It's a brilliant card and it's well worth grabbing if you see one. It is unfortunately rare, so you're not likely to see many of them in the draft, but it is certainly something you want to be grabbing as a Boros player. Aerial Maneuver. It's a weakish combat trick. It's a great to just swing the battle. 2 mana, +1/+1, flying and first strike. Yes, sure, it's quite useful to be able to have so much different variation on a single card there, and there's so many options to go with it. For a common, it's probably one you're going to see a couple of, and probably one you're going to grab a couple of in a draft. And it's a nice little card, but it is quite situational, and knowing when to use it is really going to be the question. It is one that you are probably going to see quite a few of, so definitely use it. Angelic Edict. It's an okay-ish card. It's probably a sideboard card more than anything, because it's quite high cost. Yes, exiling creature, very useful. There's not that many massive enchantments that you really want to be getting rid of in this set, so the secondary effect isn't going to come in that bad, but it is a sorcery rather than an instant, so for 5 mana for a sorcery to exile a creature, it is a little on the expensive side, and so it's not going to be that amazing to use. You'll probably obviously pick them up, a couple up in a draft, the way things go, but it is something that you're either not going to use very often, or you're going to keep sideboarded until you see that you definitely need it. Assault Griffin. It's a reprint from M11, M12. It's a flying 3/2 for 4 mana. There's not much left to say. It fits in battalion, it keeps things moving. It's got evasion, so it lets you get damage in whenever you can, whenever you can, but it's not amazing. You'll probably pick a couple up in the draft. Court Street Denizen. Every single colour has a Denizen now. It's not got an amazing ability. You're going to run out of white creatures, white casts, quite quickly, so you're not really going to be able to use it that often. And it's not really that much of a lockdown. All it really is essentially saying, cast the white creature before you attack, stop one of their creatures from blocking. That's about it. Yeah, sure, it's useful and it fits in the rest of the set, and yeah, it's a 2/2, so it fits in with line with the rest of your creatures, and it will enable some battalion effects, but it's not amazing. Daring Skyjet. Battalion that gives evasion. You can't ask for more than that. It's a 3/1 for 2 mana, so good damage on it. You're going to be trying to always hit with the battalion effects. It gives you evasion, you get in, you do more damage. It's a good card. It's not an amazing card, but a good card. Certainly one that you're going to want to have a few of in your draft. It's very good to get a few of these in early to be able to get the beats in before your opponent can react, so probably worth grabbing a few of them, definitely. Debtor's Pulpit. It is probably more of an Orzhov card than a Boros card. It's 5 cost to then be able to throw out a tap whenever you need it. It's useful late game when you've got the spare mana knocking around to just throw it onto one of your land and just keep going. It's not amazing, but it's certainly not terrible, and it is very situational with when you're going up against an opponent like Gruul with their big tramply creatures, it helps keep them locked down whenever you need to, stop them attacking. It's situational, but useful. Next we've got Guardian of the Gateless. It's a holy day 3/3 flyer. It's going to soak in an entire attack that could be useful. It's a really nice card. 5 mana for a 3/3 flyer, little on the expensive, but then when you consider the ability, it's a brilliant blocker. It just sits there and soaks everything. If you're going up against another weenie deck, it'll soak everything and laugh. If you're going up against a bigger deck, yeah, it can get squished. If you can find any way to pump it, brilliant. Any combat tricks you can use on it, wonderful. If you can give this guy Death Touch in any way, it's going to be ridiculous. Really nice card. Certainly worth grabbing a few to be defensive. And even if you're not being defensive, it's a 3/3 flyer. Evasion creature, you're going to get the damage in. Guildscorn Ward. It gives protection against half the set. Let's be honest. Both RTR and Gatecrash full of multicolored stuff. Really useful. It is a 2-for-1 because it's an enchant creature, but because it's multicolored, it's less likely to actually happen. Useful, and especially good again to go back on to Guardian of the Gateless, because again you then have a 3/3 that can block everything and has protection against multicolored. What more do you want? Hold the Gates. Vigilance is always a little underrated. This card is great. All your creatures get +0/+1 for each gate you control and have vigilance. Now you're going to be wanting to have 1 or 2 gates anyway. Yes, in a draft it's harder to get the gates you want, and they are a little rarer, but you need to grab at least 1. And even if you don't, they're going to give vigilance anyway. And as a Boros deck, when you want to be attacking every turn, you can't argue with vigilance. The extra buff, it's useful. 3 mana, it's worth grabbing 1 or 2 if you can find them. If not, don't panic, but it is worth grabbing them. Holy Mantle. Again, this is another great thing for Guardian of the Gateless. There seems to be a lot of combos that go with Guardian of the Gateless to make sure that you've got that soak. Protection from creatures is just silly. On something like Guardian, it just becomes insane. And +2/+2. A little expensive at 4 mana, but let's be honest, protection from creatures will make anything you've got crazy. So it's a nice card to grab if you can. Night Watch. It does sound like the name of a comedy film, really. 2 bodies for your battalion triggers, sure. 2 triggers for your Court Street Denizen, sure. But at 5 mana, it's a little expensive. Yes, you've got 2 2/2s with vigilance, but you would have hoped they had first strike instead. You'd have hoped that you get the triggers on something else. If you're desperate for the extra creatures, or if you're desperate to get the triggers on other things, go for it. But it's not amazing. It is a common, it is something you're going to be picking up a few of in the draft, but don't go overboard on them, because for that mana cost, it's a little much. Nav Squad Commandos, again, it's 5 mana, but it's a 3/5 with a nice battalion. It's a very decent blocker, but the battalion buffs it and untaps it, which means you can keep attacking with this every turn as long as you've got battalion. When you attack, it's a 4/6, then it's ready to block again. Really nice card all round. Very good for very good for mid game, and certainly something you'll grab a couple of in the draft. Righteous Charge. Brilliant for an Alpha Strike. When you're getting ready to just steamroll them in one big hit, and let's be honest with Boros, as I said before, you're going to want to hitting as often as possible. It's effectively a white weenie deck, your standard old school play. You're going to want to hitting often and quickly. 2/2 to everything. For only 3 mana, it's certainly never anything to be argued against. It's an uncommon. Grab a couple if you can on the draft. You'll find that they really swing your final battle and really make a big difference. Combine it with some of the other tricks we've seen and it can be hilarious, but it's a good card. I'd grab a couple. Shielded Passage. It's a great card again that goes on Guardian of the Gateless. It's useful to just block everything and then just say, yeah, it's not going to die. It's useful with your battalion cards to make sure that you get in there and don't lose your creatures but can take most of their board off. It's not amazing, but it's pretty good. And for 1 white mana, you can't argue. So I'd grab a couple if you can. It's useful for just making sure that the trades go in your favour whenever it's your attack phase, but it's not a terrible card. Smite. It's very Orzhov, less Boros, but it's still quite a nice card. It's not really going to help the aggressive decks. Yes, it goes well with Guardian of the Gateless, but Boros, you're meant to be attacking. You're not meant to be blocking. You're meant to be hitting them early, fast, getting the damage in, and not really, give them the chance to attack you. So it's not amazing. You will probably pick up 1 or 2 in the draft because it's a common. It's only 1 mana, but it's not really the way you want to be playing. You want to be playing a lot more aggressive than this. This really does fit Orzhov more than Boros. Urbis Protector. At first glance, it's not really what you want. 6 mana for 5/5 across 2 different creatures. But it's not all bad. I mean, 2 bodies, 2 battalion triggers. You've got this 1/1 to chump block, so it's useful there. And of course, the angel flying, so straight in over the top. We love the evasion creatures. If you can get it, if you use it outside a draft, the angel obviously perfect idea for populate. It's a good little card for that, but it's not terrible. It's on the top end of where you want to be looking for your mana curve in a draft, so be careful on that one, but it's not a terrible card. Well, it's a 2/3 for 4 mana with a repeatable life gain. Not an amazing body, not an amazing creature, but the life gain's really useful. 2/3 is a little bit low for 4 mana, let's be honest. But it is really useful to get your extra mana and to get your extra life, and you can't argue too much with that. It's probably going to go well in an Orzhov deck rather than a Boros, and the life gaining will be quite helpful there, but not a terrible creature to pick up in a draft if you happen to see one. Then we've got Bomber Corps. Got a nice battalion on this one. It's a 2 mana 1/2 creature with a reasonable battalion that lets you just snipe things off. It's a common. You're going to be picking up a good few of these in the draft if you can. Get in there, get some little pings off, damage out their creatures, or use them to really push the extra damage up on your opponent. It's a nice little card. Not terrible, not amazing, but for a common, you can't ask for much more than that. Towering Thunderfist. It's a 4/4 for 5. The Vigilance is useful when you want to use it. There's not a lot to say. It's not an amazing pick because it is on the high end of your curve. It's a 4/4. Boros, you really are more looking lots of quick, cheap, lots of creatures. So this really is on the higher end of do I, don't I. But again, in a draft, you'll probably end up picking 1 or 2 up. There's not much to say about it, really. Warmind Infantry. It's the sort of battalion that most people have been looking for. It's a 3 mana 2/3. Not perfect, but okay. Attacks, it gets buffed majorly to a 4/3. It's good. It's a bit of a tricky battalion. You've got to make sure that you get it in, and you've got to make sure that obviously your opponent isn't expecting it if you can. It's certainly, you're going to want a couple of these in your curve on the draft anyway. As a common, hopefully you'll see them. Get a few of these in and you'll be laughing. Fortress Cyclops. We quite like this card. 5 mana for a 3/3. You might feel it's a little expensive, but the bonuses there are really good. You attack, it's a 6/3. You're going to want to attack because of the battalion effect, so it's good. You block, it's a 3/6. Either way, it's a really nice creature to be able to do the damage it needs to do. It's really flexible, and it's going to survive there, hopefully. If you're playing against a Gruul player, you keep that there ready for block. They're going to have to blood rush to be able to get past it. So it's really good to be able to use in most situations. Grab as many as you can. Martial Glory. It's a giant growth, but with a flexibility to split it. Let's be perfectly honest, you're probably always going to use it on the one creature. You're probably very rarely going to actually split the ability, but it's got the flexibility there if you need it. For 2 mana, in the draft, grab a few. It'll help turn a battle. It'll be useful. Grab as many as you can, really. Order and Veteran. Wizards are starting to get a lot more confident in using Double Strike and actually using it well. 4 mana for 3/1. You may think that's a little overcosted, but Double Strike is really powerful. So it's worth grabbing them. It's on the slightly higher end of the curve when it comes to your weenies, but get it in there and it's going to make the difference. It's really going to make the difference in a battle, and it's a good creature, so well worth grabbing it. Wojek Halberdiers. Even if it's got a silly name and slightly silly art, it's a really nice card. It's 2 mana for a 3/2, which is strong on its own. And then with Battalion, it gains first strike. You cannot argue with that, especially for a common. You're going to be wanting to pick up 4 of these, if not more, in your draft, getting them out early, attacking lots, and doing a ton of damage with them. They are brilliant. Arrows of Justice. It's a removal spell that you're just going to want to keep playing all the time. It's a brilliant card for a draft. It's going to do a ton of damage. Be wary of blood rush attacks, because they can blood rush in response to this, and that kind of nullifies the effect, but it's a really good card. Boros Reckoner. It's a brilliant card. It's amazing. It's 3/3 for 3, which again is pretty good. You've got the ability to give it first strike, and then whenever it's dealt damage, it just goes and throws that damage elsewhere. And you can block and end up block a creature and do 6 damage to that creature. You've got so much flexibility to really use this card. Even if you just count it as a 3/3, it's a decent card, especially in your curve in a Boros deck. Get it in with Battalion, but with that extra ability, it is a really nice card. Any way you can pump it with more toughness, you're going to want to do it. Grab as many as you can in a draft. Shattering Blow. There's a grand total of 8 artifacts in this set. None drastically need removing. Yeah, the bracers are very powerful with the right creature, but that's rare. You're not going to see it really in the pre-release of the draft. You might, but it's going to be very rare. This is very much a sideboard card. It's very rare you're going to have a need for it. I would even pass it on the draft or the pre-release if I could, because you're just not going to have a need for it very often. So be careful with this one. It's probably a good card outside, probably a good card in standard and limited, but it's not amazing in the draft because you just not got much of a need for it. And that's the card for the Boros. So we will be back again for our next set, and join us then.